Hello, my name's Janet Ford and I live in the beautiful town of Stratford-upon-Avon. Yes, that's Stratford, famous for William Shakespeare, the most well-known writer in the world. But did you know there was another famous writer that lived here? Marie Corelli. Mary who, you say? Mary what? So let's get right down to it. Today we're going to visit the home of Marie Corelli. Now, why haven't we heard of her today? She outsold many of her contemporaries, such as H.G. Wells, Rudyard Kipling, and yes, even Dickens. So, follow me. Marie Corelli. Right, so I'm just leaving my house now and we're off round to Marie Corelli's house. This way. Right, so we're walking back down Sheep Street. So we've walked along Sheep Street and we're at the end by the town hall, and this time we're going to turn left into Church Street. Follow me. Here we are outside the home of Marie Corelli, where she lived from 1901 until her death in 1924. Mary Mackay, or Minnie Mackay, was born on the 1st of May 1855 in Bayswater, London, and known by her pseudonym Marie Corelli. She was a best-selling British novelist of the Victorian and Edwardian eras, whose controversial works of the time often label her as an early advocate of the New Age movement. Marie Corelli was the most popular novelist of the turn of the century, outselling Hal Caine, Mrs. Humphrey Ward, H.G. Wells, and Arthur Conan Doyle by the thousands. For 30 years she was ridiculed by reviewers and the literary elite. Edmund Gosse dismissed her as that little milliner. But those opinions had no impact on her mass appeal. In 1895, with The Sorrows of Satan, she broke all previous publishing records, and by 1906 a Corelli novel sold 100,000 copies a year. For years, Marie Corelli maintained that she was the daughter of an Italian father and Scottish mother, but was adopted in infancy by Charles Mackay, a poet and journalist. In actuality, Corelli was the daughter of Mackay and Mary Ellen Mills, a servant who became his second wife in 1859 and then adopted by Mr. Mackay. Her brother was the poet Eric Mackay. The family moved to Ferndale near Box Hill, Surrey, where Corelli was encouraged to pursue music by her neighbour George Meredith. The name Corelli was chosen as appropriate for a musical career. In 1866, 11-year-old Mary was sent to a Parisian convent to further her education. She returned to Britain 4 years later in 1870. Was Marie gay? Marie was probably gay, and this would certainly have meant ostracisation in Victorian society, if she had been openly so. It was certainly treated with disgust. But she may well not have thought of herself in those terms. Whilst it was not illegal, as it was for men from 1885, so Marie often affected to be an actual man-hater, having avowed such hatred and disgust for the male portion of our species, that if a man only touches her by accident, she feels a sense of outrage for days. A wag noted that Beethoven was the only man she could have loved, because he has the advantage of being dead. Thus inspired to write the love poem, To a Vision. She speaks of sexual desire as secretive, with gentle footsteps approaching in the darkness of the night, bringing dewy kisses, flowery fragrance, and caressing hands, all without any gender reference except for a closing allusion to a motherly breast. An earlier poem, woven into A Romance of Two Worlds, speaks of the bitterness of her beloved's queenly disdain, concluding with the dramatic, I love thee, I dare to love thee. The thee she dared to love was Bertha Viver, who had known Marie from youth and was witness to every success and heartbreak of Marie's career. They began to live together in 1878, when Burr was 24 and Marie a year younger. To Bertha, Marie was always the wee one, or my wee pet. Later, the words wee author. Despite their mutual plumpness, Burr thought of the wee one as a small, angelic child who needed constant affection. Marie called Bertha Mamacita in the early days at Ferndale. Then at Longridge Road, Kensington, and forever afterwards, she was my darling Burr and dearest Burr, whom Reverend William Stuart Scott described as a big, comfortable cushion Marie could lay her head upon. Scott, who knew both women exceedingly well, is the only commentator to state frankly and uncritically that their love was surely in the Damon and Pythias, the David and Jonathan class. Marie was sometimes faulted for her opinions of marriage, for the question, why did she never marry, was often addressed in her wonderfully inimical style. Yet if one looks between the lines, her seemingly castigation of the typical heterosexual marriage can be seen to uphold her long life liaison as sacred. She said, marriage is not the church, the ritual, the blessing of clergymen, or the ratifying and approving presence of one's friends and relations. Nothing can make marriage an absolute sacred thing except the great love. Marie and darling Burr purchased Mason Croft, a run-down Tudor mansion in Stratford upon Avon, believed to be the home of one of Shakespeare's daughters, restoring it to its former glory. The gardens were so large they stretched all along Chestnut Walk, which now has a wall with cars parked alongside. Marie and conservation. Marie fought hard for the preservation of Stratford's 17th century and 16th century buildings and donated money to help their owners remove the plaster or brickwork that often covered their open timber-framed facades. After Marie moved to Stratford-upon-Avon in 1899, she crusaded to preserve Shakespeare's shrine in the Church of the Holy Trinity and worked to prevent some cottages once owned by Shakespeare's descendants from being demolished for a Carnegie library. She also helped establish Harvard House for visiting students of Harvard University. She bought and restored a 16th century house, Mason Croft, which is now the Shakespeare Institute of the University of Birmingham. She published a pamphlet to encourage British people to visit Stratford-upon-Avon. The Firs was a large house standing where the police station is now. Its gardens are still in existence, and along with an 18th century dovecot in one corner they contain a plaque reading, The Firs, a nearby house no longer in existence, lends the gardens its name. When it was sold in 1910, Marie Corelli, the famous novelist, bought the gardens to preserve them as an open space for the benefit of the town. Marie was a conservationist long before there was a general understanding of the term, and in 1901 suggested the establishment of an organisation for that purpose. she had to wait until 1913 before the Guild of Stratford was established, at which time she became a committee member. During the next couple of years, she paid for the whole grammar school to go to the circus, for nearly 2,000 children to attend parties in the Memorial Theatre, and for over 600 national school children to visit Rugby Park. At the beginning of the 20th century, such treats did not often come the way of the town's youngsters. She became involved in a national controversy regarding the placement of a memorial in Holy Trinity Church, to be followed by an international controversy related to a free public library in Henley Street. In the first she was wholly successful, and in the second partly so. In 1901 she was elected president of the Stratford-upon-Avon Choral Union, organising a sell-out concert at the Memorial Theatre, as well as a concert on the river with illuminated boats. In 1903 she was alerted to an elaborately carved corner post that had been uncovered during repair work on numbers 23 to 24 High Street and the corner of Ely Street. She subsequently paid the owner, printer A.J. Stanley, £200, nearly $20,000 in today's money, to enable him to restore the building to its original Tudor condition. 2 years later, Marie bought a 16th century property called Harvard House, which had belonged to Mr. and Mrs. Rogers. Their daughter, Catherine, was mother of John Harvard, founder of Harvard University. The house was in a run-down condition, and Marie found support for its repair amongst various wealthy Americans. Restoration took 4 years, and in October 1909 it was opened by the then American ambassador. Today it is in the care of the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust. In 1916 she urged the Guild to pay for the uncovering and preservation of the old timbers at 30 High Street, owned by Fred Winter, estimated at £75, over £7,000 today. Marie contributed £60 and the Guild £15. At the beginning of the 1920s, plans for the restoration of the gardens at New Place, Shakespeare's last home, were in full swing, with a number of donors, including Queen Alexandra and the Earl of Pembroke, giving plants. According to Roy Strong in his book The Quest for Shakespeare's Garden, Marie had saved the day by contributing a cheque for £50 towards the planting of Ernest Lord's New Place garden. Novelist Barbara Comrie Carr mentions Corelli's guest appearance at an exhibition of Anglo-Saxon items found at Bidford-on-Avon in 1923. Corelli's eccentricity became well known. She would boat on the Avon in a gondola, complete with gondolier, whom she brought over from Venice. In his autobiography, Mark Twain, who had a deep dislike of Corelli, describes visiting her in Stratford-upon-Avon and how the meeting changed his perception. During the First World War, Corelli's personal reputation suffered when she was convicted of food hoarding. Her works. Marie's first book, A Romance of Two Worlds, 1886, dealt with psychic experience, a theme in many of her later novels. Her first major success was Barabbas, A Dream of the World's Tragedy, 1893, in which her treatment of the crucifixion was designed to appeal to popular taste. The Sorrows of Satan, 1895, also based on a melodramatic treatment of a religious theme, had an even wider vogue. In the 1890s, Marie Corelli's novels were eagerly devoured by millions in England, America, and the colonies. Her readers ranged from Queen Victoria and Gladstone to the poorest of shopgirls. In all she wrote 30 books, the majority of which were phenomenal bestsellers. Despite the fact that her novels were either ignored or belittled by the critics, at the height of her success, she was the best-selling and most highly paid author in England. Mary enjoyed a period of great literary success from the publication of her first novel until the First World War. Sales of her novels exceeded the combined sales of popular contemporaries, including Arthur Conan Doyle, H.G. Wells, and Rudyard Kipling. Marie tapped into the perfect escapist novel, mixing mysticism, spiritualism, science, and romance. Her work outsold that of Dickens and other male authors. Her publisher, George Bentley, said of her, "In the first place, she really does say what she means, and so you are dealing with a reality. In the next place, she has strong likes and dislikes, and good reasons for either." Gladstone said to her, "There is a magnetism in your pen which will influence many." When Thelma was published in 1887, a large number of the mothers were influenced enough to give their baby girls the same name, which Corelli was said to have invented. Throughout her immensely successful career, she was accused of sentimentality and poor taste. In their music studio, Marie built a fireplace with a large stone over the mantel, into which was engraved Bertha Vyers and her own initials elaborately intertwined. It was a pure expression of their love. Marie had a sudden premonition that the end was near and asked her nurse to send for Bertha. It was late. The nurse did not believe Marie was so near death's door as that, and demurred of waking anyone. Bertha lamented. Marie would not be consoled. Sitting upright in her chair all night, she implored with tears in her eyes that it might be sent for, but the nurse, not realizing how close she was to our sympathy, could not humour her. Next morning she passed away without again seeing me or feeling the touch of my hand. It was April the 21st, 1924. Bertha herself died some time later in 1942 and was buried alongside her beloved wee pet, Marie Corelli, in the Stratford cemetery on the Evesham Road. Mason Croft, for all Bertha's heroic efforts to preserve the shrine Marie had wanted, had insufficient funds for such a purpose, and it was sold. Antique dealers and sincere readers seeking some small memento of the author crowded before an auctioneer. Marie's adored pony cart, which she had often ridden into town, went to her theatrical producer for use in a London pantomime. Her gondola, The Dream, fetched 57 guineas. Her legacy. Corelli is generally accepted to have been the inspiration for at least two of E. F. Benson's characters in his Lucia series of 6 novels and a short story. The main character, Emmeline, Lucia, Lucas, is a Mrs. Bouquet-type character, a vain and snobbish woman of the upper middle class, with an obsessive desire to be the leading light of her community, to associate with the nobility, and to see her name reported in the social columns, coupled with a comical pretension to education and musical talent, neither of which she possesses in the book. She also pretends to be able to speak Italian, something Corelli was known to have done. In Chapter 3 of Bruce Marshall's The World, the Flesh and Father Smith, the protagonist, a Catholic priest, is in hospital recovering from a wound. A nurse gives him a copy of Marie Corelli's Temporal Power, with the hope that convert him to Protestantism. However, Father Smith finds the book stupid and flamboyant, puts it aside, and prays for Corelli, since she really ought to have known better. In 2007, the British film Angel, based on a book by Elizabeth Taylor, was released as a thinly veiled biography of Corelli. The film starred Romola Garari in the Corelli role and also starred Sam Neill and Charlotte Rampling. It was directed by Francois Ozon, who stated, "The character of Angel was inspired by Marie Corelli, a contemporary of Oscar Wilde and Queen Victoria's favourite writer. Corelli was one of the first writers to become a star, writing bestsellers for an enduring public. Today she has been largely forgotten, even in England." Her grave in the town cemetery has an angel hovering over it. Marie Corelli was hardly an angel. She was an outspoken, famous, fearless woman who happened to be unmarried and running her own household. Throughout her stay in the town, she ruffled many feathers, especially those of the town council, but was openly adored worldwide by millions of fans. She appealed for charity on behalf of hospitals during the First World War, but was convicted of hoarding food against regulation. She could be fleeting with friends, but she lived solely with one woman, Bertha Vyers, for 40 years, dedicating her books to her and leaving her everything in her will. She once said, "I never married because there was no need. I have 3 pets at home which answer the same purpose as a husband. I have a dog which growls every morning, a parrot which swears all afternoon, and a cat that comes home late at night.